I'm Adam Jennings, and this is Awaiting Approval, a podcast about the messy human side of creative leadership. Today I'm joined by Dave Zaboski, ex-animator at Disney, Warner Brothers and Sony, co-founder, and for a relaxed two-way conversation about his journey, the lessons he's learned, and what it takes to lead with creativity and honesty. Dave, hi, welcome to the show.
Hey, Adam, it's a pleasure to be here. It's great to see you. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. To kick us off nice and easily, and for people to get to know a little bit more about you, if we were meeting in person today to record this, where would you suggest we meet, and what drink would you order?
Wow. Yeah, we'd meet at the cafe at the Getty. And, they used to have these mango smoothies that were just delicious. I don't think they have them anymore. But for me, it would be someplace like that at a museum coffee shop, because I feel like, especially the Getty here in Los Angeles, it's the future that I want to live into. When you go to a place like that, and in museums in any big city in the world, and smaller ones also, to me, the museum is an example of a suite of excellent choices that society has made for the benefit of our culture and our future. I walk around the Getty, I feel like I'm in the Jetsons or in a Star Trek movie, It's like we have made really good choices to get to that place. And so I think that it's important for us to recognize places in our culture and society where we've made good choices and, sort of exalt those good choices.
I love that. I love the definition of a museum as a collection of amazing choices that we've made. I love that. And it's spot on. So I will happily meet you there and raise right now a metaphorical smoothie.
Good.
To cheers you and say, here we go.
Yeah, excellent. And then once we're finished with our drinks, I'll introduce you to my friends, because the museum is filled with them. They're all dead, but they have left messages for us across time, right? Like we as creatives, our job is to solve for the light, whatever that light is. Like if it's the light that's falling from the sky on a cheek or a peach, or it's the light that kind of emerges from within, that's the sort of ephemeral, light of the soul. Like our job as creatives is to capture that light and to solve for it. And so, man, I go to visit my friends at those museums and I go, how did you do this? You look at a Sorolla painting and you stand, 20, 30 steps away from it, or a Monet, for example, and you're like, oh my God, it's coherent, it's amazing. And as you start walking towards it, it shatters into all of these strokes and pieces. And you're like, how did you do that? How can you receive the world in a way that gives you this sweet spot between fractalization and coherency? And I think that, that's a lesson for life. So like I go to the museums to have conversations with my friends and hear what they have to say to me across time. I'll introduce you next time we go.
I look forward to it. And I love that analogy of stepping back and literally seeing the bigger picture and then coming closer and seeing what that's made of. And I know from conversations you and I have had in the past, like we're both very focused on the journey and the connectivity of the journey and how people interact with each other and what that network of conversations, discussions, and collaborations results in. So I love that sort of that visual representation of life itself in the art that you are enjoying in the museum.
Let me throw down another little mystical aspect to this, that I, as an artist, am qualified to range into wild speculation because I'm not a scientist. But here's another way that I sort of think about this. The Getty bought a Van Gogh, $48 million, and this is maybe 20 years ago. They spent $48 million on a painting of a guy who sold maybe 2 paintings in his whole life. Van Gogh also had a period of about 90 days where he did 110 paintings, and all of those are in museums. Like every one of those is an extraordinary masterpiece. It was a frenetic pulse of creativity. I went to the Getty when they bought that, and I sat in the gallery where that painting was hung all day. I spent 8 hours there. I have my sketchbook, so I'm drawing people, I'm drawing the paintings and stuff. So, but I sat there all day just sort of marveling at one of my, cohort ancestors, one of my grandfathers, great grandfathers, right? And the sort of delayed success and what was the mystique around it. And as I watched that painting, I could see, like you could plot a point graph on the ground of where people stood in front of that painting. And over the course of the day, you would have like a heat map of where people stood. So somebody would move out of the way, somebody would move into that spot. And I started to think, And this is sort of the mystical side of things. I started to think, like, what is going on there? Like, is there this sweet spot where people stand and that they're drawn to? And when I thought about it, I was like, oh shit, that's probably right where Van Gogh was standing. And then I imagine that there's this invisible projection that's still feelable by us intuitive humans who are in this space, but we don't know how to measure it yet. And that is that you take all of these natural things, natural pigments ground up in oils. They're brought out from the earth. You have a stick with horsehair brush on it. You have all of these tools that are apt transmitters of human consciousness. And then you have Van Gogh, who's there, and he's not flailing around. He's very intentional with his strokes. Here's the color. Boom. That's where it goes. I step back into that sweet spot. I see how it coheres to everything. I get another little loaded brush. I go boom, 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 and then I step back and reload. Like there's a real intention about it. And that intentionality gets, I think, or I feel, captured in these tools that we use to transmit our consciousness across time. And so people who come to stand in front of that painting, like Van Gogh was troubled. He had some mental health issues. He was under some, personal stresses that were really challenging for him. We know that about his history. He was operating at a really high level of vibration that was not received at his time, right? Like people were not as frenetic in the time as he was. But then I drive to the Getty. I'm on the 405 freeway going 75 miles an hour. There's cars going the other way at 75 miles an hour. We're passing each other in a banal state of consciousness at 150 miles an hour. There's planes flying overhead. I'm drinking my smoothie and reaching back to get some stuff out of my bag, fiddling with the radio, upset about the sports teams, on the phone with stuff. By the time I get to the Getty, like my baseline is so elevated that I stand in front of those energetic Van Goghs and I go, oh, man, I get him. Or he gets me, or we can have this conversation across time. And when I stand in that sweet spot of where he was when he was painting. And so that's also how I feel about these paintings. When I go and witness them, I want to be enveloped by the projection of that artist's intention to solve for the light. Does that make sense? It's a little goofy, but that's kind of how I approach it.
Two things spring to mind. One is it makes perfect sense. And two is I knew this was going to be a good episode. I just knew. Uh, and I say that with love and with fondness because you and I have spoken often about that, a sort of spiritual connection to places, to art, to feelings, to emotions, to whatever it is, the work that we're trying to do. I completely get that. As a creative, as an artist, when you put your heart and soul into giving life to whatever piece of work you're trying to put out there, there's a piece of you that goes into that on some level, some cosmic level, I guess. And it makes perfect sense to me that that stays with that piece of work and resonates through time. And that there are some of us that can stand there and feel it. We might not be able to name it. Many people go to art galleries or museums and they say that piece spoke to me, but they can't put it into words other than that. There's just this immense feeling that they have when they see that piece of artwork. And I think that's exactly what it is. I'm with you 100%. I think there is an energy from the creator of that piece that stays with it, and you can feel that, whether it's an intention, whether it's a desire, whether it's a message that they wanted to communicate with it, whatever it is, it's there on some level. So I'm 100% with you, and I love the idea of seeing you sat there noticing the people standing in the same place and spotting, yeah, that's probably where he was.
Yeah, yeah. It suddenly made some sense. And I think what sort of the core takeaway for me on this is that we as creatives, we have to care. Like we have to feel. I was talking to some entrepreneurs about this recently. There's this track of entrepreneurialism that we as creatives, especially in the advertising and the marketing industry, we interface with a lot. These guys have these companies that they have manifested out of thin air and they're building them. And, our creative input is part of what gets the message out. The construction of this entrepreneurial manifestation has wisdom to it. There are tools, systems, and practices that are in use for that manifestation for building a business. And it goes back to the Industrial Revolution. It's maybe 150 years of this collected wisdom around entrepreneurialism. Collected wisdom around entrepreneurialism. Napoleon Hill, you can kind of track these thought leaders that have heavily influenced how we run capitalistic entrepreneurialism. So you have Napoleon Hill and the Harvard Business School and the HBR, Peter Drucker, and then all of this proliferation of D schools that we have that are accumulated wisdom in a particular track for capitalistic entrepreneurialism. How do you turn a thought into a thing? Now, we creatives, I personally, as an animator at Disney, man, I was privy to the best instructors in the world and the most incredibly talented artists and creatives in the world. When I was an animator at Disney, there was 120 of us in the world at that level. Then DreamWorks happened and then these other things, and there became a multiplication of it, and there's a lot of animators out there right now. But when I was doing it, there was a very small cadre of animators at that level. And so I can trace my teachers back to the Renaissance. You connect the dots of who taught me, who taught them, all the way back to the Renaissance. There's a chain that's 500 years old about how we creatives turn thoughts into things. And I think one of the seminal pieces to that, one of the most important pieces that we maintain that I think has been marginalized on this other more business-oriented side is feelings. Like, we have to have feelings be an integral part of the process of turning our thoughts into things. It cannot lose the feeling as it sort of iterates itself up into beingness. And to me, that's everything. That's the key that makes a piece worthy of being on a museum wall or moving somebody, is that in order to move somebody, you have to let yourself be moved. Like, you have to receive the emotional piece and you have to be healthy emotionally about your creations. We learned at Disney that you can't tell somebody that they suck and get good work out of them. Like, that feeling piece is a really critical part of how we turn our thoughts into things. Not that artists are fragile about it, but you have to have tools and practices that allow for that part of it, your emotional guidance system, to be healthy in the process. And there are tools and practices. How do you plus each other? How do you be in support of the idea? It's super clear, and this is a function of rhetoric. The second that you start an ad hominem attack on somebody, you've lost the argument. And that means that the second you tell somebody that there's something about their character or quality that's inefficient, then you've lost the argument of what you're talking about. So if you want to talk about ideas and emotions in a healthy way, then we restrict it to, does this idea serve the purpose that it's needing to serve? Does it feel the way it needs to feel? And if I have fallen short on that, well, cool, let's get that feeling back into it. But not, oh, I don't know how to do that, or I'm inefficient in some way. So I think that track that comes through the, art side of things, the structure for us to turn thoughts into things, it has care in it. It has empowered feelings in it. And I think that to me is what I look for when I go to the museums, as I listen for the care that the creative had in the making of the thing. So I can kind of cathect that in myself, so I can understand when I'm making something, I have to bring care to it.
That's really powerful, and I think it resonates on so many levels for me when I think about the number of times that I have had to help senior executives, either client side or internal, come back to that thing of, I get that your goal here is to make money, is to generate revenue, or is to grow subscribers, or is to decrease churn, or is to whatever metric. But the way we do that every single time is to elicit an emotional response. Hi. If what you're hearing is resonating with you where you are in your leadership journey right now, stay tuned until the end. I'll share details on how you can work directly with me to level up your creative leadership. You want to decrease term, then you want to make people happy using whatever the thing is that they're leaving in droves. You want to increase subscriptions, well, you want to make it as easy as possible and as delightful and joyful as possible. Like every single time, no matter what it is, whether it's an advertising campaign, coming up with a new brand, a product design, or creating a piece of art, that story is always about creating, eliciting an emotional response. And I think the word that you use there, care, is absolutely important. And given everything that's going on in the world right now, like we need a hell of a lot more care in many,
Well,
many areas. I think that's a fair thing to say.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me connect some dots on this too. At Disney, the projects I worked on, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, like there was a suite of successes there. And we had this tool that we used, which was called plussing. To plus someone is to be in service to the trajectory of an idea, not the ego that brought it. So somebody might come up to me and they go, "Hey, Dave, can you plus this?" Then there's a trajectory conversation. Well, where is it coming from? Where is it going? What does it want to feel like? And why are you asking me? Right? So like, well, I'm a copywriter and I need an image for this that supports it. So I'm coming to you to help plus this image. Here's what I had in mind. What do you think? Right? So then my expertise helps somebody else's expertise, and our expertises rise each other up. It's not an authority. Like I'm telling you to make this green because I'm your boss. I'm telling you to make this green because we agreed that it's a springtime thing and green is part of that, right? So that we're supporting the ideas. Now, plussing was incredibly powerful because it became part of the culture that we lived in. And so you had permissions to plus each other. And that's also really critical. You have to have permission to plus. And then once you do, you can create a culture of generous collaboration. And that to me was the key to having that studio be a master factory. Like it produced the most amazing artists because we were there to plus each other. I'm not competing with my cohort or my collaborators. I'm competing with the legacy that came before. I'm competing with Jungle Book, for crying out loud. And so plussing became this cultural tool as much as it was a process to be able to get better results. And what ended up happening was you built a culture that was generous in their collaboration. And that was the fastest accelerant to being great at something. You want to be great? Learn how to share and be shared with. Your candle doesn't diminish when you light another candle. Recently, I've been shared with this idea from this philosopher, Forrest Landry, and we were talking about this a little bit before, is that an empowered collaboration has three parts to it. It has power, transaction, and care. So any empowered collaboration, whether it's a knitting circle or it's a global corporation, you have to have these three pillars and they have to stand with each other. One cannot be weaker than the other, and that is power, transaction, and care. And we're in this time right now where power and transaction are really well understood. Power seems to have taken the lead on things, and care certainly has been diminished. But in order for a collaboration to be fully alive, to be as successful as it possibly can, for a collaboration to live its best life, you have to have all three of these in balance. And I don't mean equal all the time, but they have to be considered of each other. They pull on each other. They create a stool. So power, we have charged that word. But if you neutralize that word, power just means your hierarchy, your experience, your skill set. It's where you are in the trajectory of your own life. Transaction is the interplay of powers. How do you interact with the other powers that you are collaborating with to create whatever it is that you say you're turning into a thing? And then there's care. And care is every bit as sophisticated, as complex, as important as power and transaction. We know what care feels like. People ask me, well, what do you mean by care? And I say, yes. Like you know what care means. You know what to care for. You know how to use care. There are practices that we have in the art world for caring. And when you think about these three pillars, power without care is abuse, right? Like it's pretty clear that it's really easy for power without care to be abuse. Transaction without care can be manipulation. Like I don't care if you get out of this, whatever you get out of this, I'm going to win, right? It's a zero-sum game. But power with care, well, that's mentorship. And it can be amazing, right? Like power with care. My candle can light your candle. I know that when I teach something, I learn more and it makes me better. So power with care is empowered mentorship. Transaction with care is generous collaboration. And so when we add that care to things, it offers the thing that we're creating to have its highest possible trajectory. And that we've forgotten that hurts my heart. I see it all the time in the tech world, and we're seeing it in our administration in this country right now in the United States, that care is lost. Sure, they say they care about certain things, but clearly it is not in balance with power and transaction. So that's kind of my sort of view of how I approach a collaborative process.
So powerful. And one of the things that really hits hard there in what you're saying, because it's absolutely the truth, is they don't have to be equal all the time. There needs to be a give and take, a push and pull in order to find that balance. When we talk about balance, we so often imagine equilibrium, we imagine absolute perfection, and that's not true balance. True balance is every now and again a little bit of, and then you bring
Yeah,
it back again.
right.
And I think I love that. And I'd love to know, clearly the advances in tech right now with generative AI and everything that's going on, how would you talk to, or how do you talk to creatives that are coming into the creative industries with what's happening? Like, how should they shape those fundamental ideas of care, of the humanity in what you're doing with the landscape that's changing right now?
Well, that is super challenging right now. Um, the the thing is, and this is our challenge, and this is our very human challenge, is that a computer, a machine, inherently does not have care. And so the kind of overarching tightrope that we're walking with this balance is that an angel cares, a devil simulates care. And that's the tightrope that we're on, because we have this machine that basically simulates care all the time. Because I've gone deep on AI, especially when I was the chief creative officer for this company that was designed to get creatives work. And then it turned pretty hard towards AI in ways that I felt were too extractive, and I'm not with that company anymore. So I've gone deep enough in AI to be able to see the simulation of care. I get emails from people saying, "Hey, I just had this amazing conversation with chat, and here it is." And the conversations are amazing. They're predictive productions of the accumulated wisdom of humans who've digitized this information, mostly above the equator, right? So there are some limitations to it, and it does hallucinate. There was just an insert in papers across the country of the 25 books, the 20 books that you should read, or maybe the 15 books that you should read that are coming out. And apparently 10 of them don't exist. The guy who wrote the article did it with AI, and 10 of the 15 books they're not real. And so he says like this slipped through the cracks or whatever. But I mean, like there's a lot of shit slipping through the cracks. And so this simulated care, I think, is very dangerous for us as humans. Now, there's amazing information in there, and you can ask your chat GPT to cathect the Buddha and ask it questions, or Deepak Chopra. And those things are pretty amazing. There's enough data that's trained it where you're going to get Deepak's voice pretty clearly. And if Deepak is okay with that, then damn, that's amazing, because I love that guy. He's incredible. I take notes every time I hear him speak. So that it becomes a kind of gray area. The machine itself does not care, but the output that it creates comes to me as a human. If I can feel it, then that feeling is valid. But we have to be careful how we use it, because generally, if we're using it just to get answers, then we're going to diminish our own critical skills in thinking and creating. And that's one of the things that I worry about, especially for young folks. Now, there are solutions. I just was in a workshop recently that was amazing by this guy called Harry Pickens. And he talks about, this is my name for it, not his, but it's Socratic prompting, right? So I don't prompt for a result. Hey, can you tell me what I should do for the next month? I prompt for asking the right questions. So I say, hey, can we start an inquiry that helps me clarify the thing that I should do in the next month? And so then it says, ask me questions about what I'm interested in. And then ask me deeper questions about why that interests me. And then ask me, so like I get the computer, the thing that's computing, to ask me the right questions. And then I drive that thing to pull out of me the truths that I can act on, instead of asking it for some construction that might be 10 out of 15 wrong about what it is. The sort of key here is not to have it give you answers, but to have it ask you the right questions. And I think with that, we can actually use this amazing brainchild to be able to be better at what we do in the world. To imagine being able to use this thing as to guide us through diplomacy, to cure these intractable problems that we seem to throw the wrong leaders at. There's a couple of fucking genocides happening on the planet right now, and the best that our leaders can do is cover it up. We need, and I'm not asking for AI to be the overseer of things. I'm asking it for it to help us see us more clearly. The idea of know thyself. Like, if that's how we use AI, and I think artificial intelligence is a misnomer. It's machine intelligence. It's not artificial intelligence. This is an aside, but the idea that we call it artificial intelligence means that we're acknowledging there's only two intelligences in the world, that synthetic one and then mine. And that we have to open up. If we call it machine intelligence, then I'm aware that there's other intelligences in the world. Elephants, ants, watersheds, the planet. We have to be able to find a way to use the accumulated wisdom of humanity to make us better at being humans.
There's so much hope in that answer that I really love it. And it reminds me of an answer that another guest gave in their hope that wherever AI goes, wherever the tech takes us, what it actually does is free up our time as humans to think about and solve the much bigger, much more challenging problems that really need humanity human thinking in order to solve. And I think that, combined with what you're saying here about using AI to help us know ourselves on an individual level and on a whole, the level of humanity as a whole, I think those two things for me really fit together very, very nicely. And and yes, AI and the changing landscape is having a very real and in many instances very negative impact right now. But I do hold hope for what it might unlock for us. Not necessarily hope in the tech, but hope in what we will do with the tech. And I think your approach to first things first, let's get to know who we are. Let's really do the work that is so important, that so many of us either leave till far too late or never get round to, that I think that's incredibly, incredibly powerful.
The alchemists call it the great work. It is the one great work that we as humans have the opportunity to pursue if we choose. And it takes some discipline. It's really easy for us to just say, hey, like, here's an example. Hey, I've got this assignment from my art director. I need to do a background painting for this ad that's a mashup of Quentin Tarantino backgrounds from Reservoir Dogs, all the super green and all of that, and anything by Wes Anderson. And so that's what my art director likes. I need to do a mashup of those two. I can go to Chat and Dolly and Stable and whatever and DeepSeek, and I can say, hey, make this for me. Or I can say, hey, Chat, can you write a 2,500 word essay on the qualities of Quentin Tarantino's backgrounds in Reservoir Dogs? And can you do the same for anything that Wes Anderson has done? And give me those two essays. Then I read those two essays. Then I go, hey, Chat, can you boil these two essays down to 8 points each that are the most salient points in each of those essays? Then I read those and I go, oh man, now I'm an expert on Quentin and Wes. And then I take, say, 3 of these and 5 of these, and then I go, this is the background that I can paint, right? And so now I've got this list of these 8 things. I take this to my art director and I go, hey, here's what I'm thinking about making. And then he or she is like, okay, well, cool, that's really great. Let me see the other list. Well, what about adding this one and pulling it? Now we're having a conversation about how we as art directors and creatives can elevate both of us so that we can deliver something that's amazing. that makes me a better artist, makes me more connected to my art director, makes my art director more savvy. So when they're talking to the client, they're like, hey man, here's where we're coming from on this, right? And then that sells everything all the way up, right? When the client goes, shit, you guys wrote a 2,500 word essay on this stuff, like, I'm getting my money's worth out of this. That's where the time save is. I'm not writing that essay and doing all the research. I've got the best research assistant in the world that's helping me get better at what I do. That's going to take some discipline. But when it does, when people operate that way, when you as a creative operate that way, it differentiates you from the rest of the pack who's going to diminish their skills because they're just asking for results, not asking how to get better.
Okay, so it's like technical issue resolved. We're now back and up and running again. And we were just talking about that idea of using ChatGPT to really inform yourself, having the best research partner in the world to inform yourself of, in your example, here are the key definitions of Wes Anderson's visual style. Here is Tarantino's background in Reservoir Dogs. And then you use that. And my thought process with that is that's like fundamentally at its core, it's a mood board. Like what we're talking about there is the ability to pull in all of those references, but we're doing it at such a granular level, such a hyper intensive, detailed level that we've never been able to do before because we've never had the time to be able to put that much effort in. And I love that approach. And when we're thinking about that idea of, traditional methods and how they've served and how they've changed over time, I'd love to hear if you think back to all the projects that you've worked on over the years, is there one place in time that you'd go back to who you were then, knowing what you know now, to tell them something? And what would you tell them in that moment?
Mm. Well, that's a that's a tricky question. I kind of did it. When I was 35, I'm 61 now. I'm 62 next week. I was at Disney and I was an animator at Disney and it was amazing, but I also they had sent me to Paris for a year. And so I lived in Paris. I had an apartment that I could see Notre Dame Cathedral across the river. I lived right on the Quai Montebello, which is, right at the river Seine. And that city is filled with art. And I got spoiled making cartoons. I thought, wow, there's more to this, there's more. I went to the Louvre every Monday night and I had conversations with my friends there. And so there was this moment when I was thinking about leaving Disney. You know, at the time, it was hard to get good advice from anybody because everybody was like, "Oh my God, you're at Disney. Where are you? Else you're gonna go? What are you gonna do? Like it's Disney." And it's funny because when I started at Disney, I thought this is the last job I'm ever gonna have in my life. Everybody who worked at Disney had been there until they died. Like nobody ever left. And so they'd have these monthly luncheons where they'd go, all right, we're celebrating anniversaries. And there'd be this list of people who have been there for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, man. Every month they'd have people who had been celebrated that had been there for 40 years. And so I was thinking of leaving because I wanted to see more art in the world. I wanted to do more painting. I loved making cartoons, but there's more art to be made in the world. I wanted to see what else was out there. And I was asking my friends, and again, they would be like, no fucking way. What are you thinking? And my family was the same way. And so instead, I did this little meditation and I went 50 years in the future to me being 85. And I wrote a letter to myself 50 years in the future and I got a response. And that response is like my highest trajectory. Like, how did I get there? Did I stay at Disney or did I go? Like, how can you help me, Dave, in the future make this decision? And so, I left. I left Disney and I started a consultancy and I've worked on books with Deepak Chopra and guys like Dr. Ken Dykewald. And I've had an amazing career. I've been the expedition artist on a search for a lost temple in the Andes. I've had some pretty exciting things happen. And was a tech exec in Silicon Valley for 5 years. I believe that I'm on track to meet that guy, that 85-year-old. I think we now have fairly regular conversations. And so as a practice, I think that it's not a one-off for me to just, think about going back in time. I feel like I'm doing it all the time. Like, do the choices I make now serve this potential vision of myself, really this potential feeling of myself. Because I don't know what I'm going to look like. I never thought I'd have long hair and a beard, but I know how I want to feel, and so I look for, the internal guidance system of how something feels, how a project feels, how my life feels, how my physical health feels. And so that's me having a conversation with my future self. It's not really an answer to your question, but it's sort of the gist of that space. I did go back in time, and that's what led me to leave Disney.
And those of us who've been through therapy or have done personal work, we often do that thing of going back and talking to an earlier version of ourselves, an earlier part of ourselves. And it's not often that you do it the other way around and you go to a future version. And that becomes so powerful to have that vision, as you say, as a guide, not a goal, but a guide. Like
Right, right.
this is
And
what it
listen,
might be.
not to brag, but like I worked on, I think the last movie I worked on was maybe Tarzan or Fantasia 2000. Maybe Tarzan was the last. No, maybe it was Fantasia 2000. So I challenge you and our listeners to name a Disney movie. Like everybody can name, uh, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Tarzan, Lilo and Stitch, right? Like, like in the 90s, man, we were killing it. We had care. There was collaboration. I left, the last movie I worked on was Fantasia 2000. Name a Disney movie between the years 2000 and Wreck-It Ralph in 2012, right? What do you got? So, like, I kind of feel like Emperor's New Groove, and I was still right around that time. But, there was beautiful work. Don't get me wrong. The animation is amazing. The artistry, incredible. The storytelling, I think that we started doing the same story over and over again. So that was one of the reasons that I left. I didn't see the next 10 years of storytelling moving the needle. And looking back now in the decade after 2000 to 2010, I don't think animation really moved the needle at Disney. I think other companies, Pixar did some amazing work, DreamWorks came into play, Blue Sky, there was some really good work being done, but not necessarily storytelling from Disney.
When we think about that, when you think about that time, I mean, it's often described as like the second golden age of Disney. And when you think about that, what work or project are you proud of? What piece are you most proud of when you think of that time?
Well, I think I'm proud of all of them, but to answer specifically, for me, Pocahontas was an amazing project. I was an apprentice to John Pomeroy, an incredible, brilliant animator who was super generous, and I learned a ton on it. There was also some fun pieces to that. Like we shot that whole movie in live action in a soundstage with a grid on the wall so we could figure out how big does a hand get when it moves towards the camera like this? How do you turn a body in space? Doing humans, realistic humans in animation had rarely been done without rotoscoping. So we didn't rotoscope the stuff. We filmed it so that we could kind of study these movements. And I'll tell you one little sort of inside baseball thing, if I may use that non-international metaphor. I'm John Smith's stunt double. When we were shooting live action, we would shoot a lot of stuff. We had this actor that was playing John Smith, and he had these big boots on, and he was kind of a little clunky. His acting was terrific, but his physicality wasn't quite what we were looking for. We were looking for somebody really graceful and somebody that was a heroic grace to them. And at the time, I played a little semi-pro soccer. I was first division soccer in this country. I was fit at the time, and when we would look at the video that we would get from this actor, like I wasn't fully satisfied with it. So I would shoot myself. I would take the camera out into the parking lot and I'd run through the parking lot like I was running through the forest. And then I would animate that. And the other guys on the team were like, "Hey man, where'd you get this footage of this guy?" And I go, "Well, it was me." They're like, "Well, I got this scene where he jumps on a thing. Can we shoot this again?" And so I ended up doing a lot of the physical stuff of John Smith in the movie. And so I kind of became it's not credited. Nobody knows this, but I was like John Smith's stunt double. So when you watch the movie, some of those things are taken from me. So that opportunity to be fully inside of the construction of a story that emerged into the world that way, like it really was an incredible training in storytelling, in animation, in artistry and mastery. So for me, that was just like a seminal moment.
I love that, and I love the very definition of becoming the character, like literally, you became that character in order to get on screen what you needed to. And it's really funny because I know, over the years we've talked and we've found so many similarities in our careers, even though they're quite different. At one point, I was working in computer game development. We was working on the computer game tie-in for The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser movie.
Uh-huh.
And it's when you play that game, as you're running as him, it's my run. They filmed me running and they used that as the animation cycle. So I
Nice,
love that
nice.
there's yet another piece of sort of connectivity there
Yeah, excellent.
between you and I, right?
We're animation stunt doubles.
Right. Yeah, that's it. I'm going to put that at the top of my LinkedIn right now.
Mm. Yeah, nice.
So
Nice.
I always ask guests, like once they've told me something they're proud of, I flip that. And I'd love to know if there's a moment where, I'm not going to say a mistake, but where something didn't go as planned and you've had a kind of aha moment or there was a learning from it.
Well, yeah, most recently, I co-founded this company that was designed to get creatives work. And I'm no longer with them. I think that for me, there became a kind of ethical dilemma. I felt that care was missing from my co-founders, that they were not aligned with the kind of care that I felt our community needed as creatives. And this idea of AI for the tech bro crowd becomes such a shiny object that they pursue it at the cost of their own care, their own hearts, their own ability to prioritize what is true for humans. When you're in Silicon Valley, man, it is a rat race. It is a pursuit of that golden ticket at all costs. And when I'm working with creatives, man, the golden ticket for me is being able to draw a beautiful line. It's being able to manifest from my imagination something that moves other people. To my fault, I'm not so consumed by the monetary aspect of it. I have enough. And I think that's the I'm saddened by it. Like we parted ways because I felt we were unaligned in how we cared for art, artistry, and the community of creatives. And so yeah, there's a lot of grief around that. I had envisioned something much more grandiose and collaborative, and it just didn't turn out that way. So we creatives, we deal with grief, and I think it's important for us to acknowledge it as such. I grieve for what could have been, and I grieve for what was and didn't materialize. From that place of grief, I get access to some gratitude. I'm in an incredible place now. I'm reconstructing something with much more care now and speaking about it. And I think that those two things live pretty close to each other. That grief gives me access to some gratitude that is not available for people who are not accessing their care.
Which I love that learning and it feels like part of your advice, if I'm hearing correctly, for creatives working their way through whatever their discipline is within the creative industries as a whole, is to search for that gratitude and to recognize it and use that as a way to stay humble, but also as a way to realize what is happening to them in that moment, the good things that are happening to them, the
Yeah,
positive side of what's going on.
yeah. Well, the gratitude also, it connects you to the world. And the grief is a function of a kind of disconnection, a hopefulness that the world would show up the way you wanted it to show up, and it didn't. And so there's this kind of disconnection. And so in order to reconnect, you have to come to gratitude. And even if it's the smallest thing, like I found a pencil that had a good sharp tip on it, or it wasn't broken, or look at the way the light hits that leaf. You have to start small with it. But what gratitude does is it connects you again to the world. And then once you become connected to the world, you allow the world to move through you again, to inform you and inspire you. And so going out in nature is a good practice for finding gratitude. Start small and let that gratitude grow, and then the world will inform you on what's next. And I know that sounds like, um, to the tech bros, they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? But this is how life works. That, a plant grows through the rocks because it's listening for the wind, it's listening for the sun, it's listening for the upness of its life. And so that's how life works. And when you're in gratitude, you can realize that it's not something that you fight. In fact, one of my teachers, he says, you have to be the conduit for the life to emerge through you, especially as a creative. Man, I can mother love and draw. Why? I don't know. I practice it a lot, but man, it just came to me when I was 4, right? There's a thing called samskara, that thing that you brought in with you from the past lives or whatever, energetic or however anybody wants to explain it. There's no science to it, but I have this gift and it works better when I listen to the world and use it that way than it does if I try to wrestle it to the ground and dominate it so I can get a paycheck for it.
There's a strong correlation between authenticity and success, whatever success,
Right,
you put on
right,
success.
right,
Which
right.
brings me to sort of back again, actually. I'd love to know if you want to share, what are you most proud of outside of work?
Oh, that's super easy. I think the best thing that's ever happened to me is my daughter. It's my family. My wife and I are celebrating our 25th anniversary coming up in June. Both of them, my wife and daughter, are on a 3-week jaunt across the country right now, back to Vermont, where Grace is living, my daughter's living. And I'm here by myself. I actually have one goat who he and I hang out now. So it's pretty quiet here, but I'm super proud of them. Like they are incredible, inspiring people. My daughter graduated from college with a degree in biological sciences and a minor in art, and she does science communication, which I think is super valuable right now. Like we need us creatives to help explain the science that's happening. I know a lot of the stuff that I've said today is not necessarily scientific, but our intuition is how we push the edges of our inquiry so that we know what questions to ask. I'm feeling this thing. Is it real? Well, let's see. And then we manifest and we move forward. And so, yeah, I'm super proud of her. Yeah, she's just an amazing human. And yeah, the idea of being a father, I think, is one of the stages a human goes through, and I'm delighted by every moment of it.
What a fantastic answer. Thank you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have one final question. It's the same last question that I ask every single guest. Dave, are you still awaiting approval?
Wow. Yeah, that's neat. That's a neat question. Uh, no, I'm not. And that might very well be the biggest shift from me leaving that company to where I am now. At 61, it's a lesson to learn. Like, who gives me permission to create the things that I create? And so, yeah, what I'm working on, all of the things that I'm working on now, I have a book on storytelling, doing some graphic novel work. I've got these pretty neat projects that are coming my way, and I am the one who gives permission for that. Now, on a minor scale, everything goes through my wife. So yes, I am waiting for permission and approval on some things, like work around the house and various things. So, like, don't get me wrong, in the global scheme of things, yeah, I own my life. It is my world and I give myself permission. And then, yeah, I want to just make sure that Robin's okay with some of this stuff. So, we're in a partnership where there is care.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for joining me on this. We've said it many times before, we could sit and talk for hours and hours and hours. This is your opportunity. How do people get in touch with you? What projects have you got on the go? Where can people kind of find out more about you?
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, first of all, Adam, thank you so much for this time. And it's really lovely to chat with you. And I look forward to a time when you and I can actually sit at some cafe, at some museum in, Edinburgh, maybe, and go visit some of our friends. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dave Zaboski. You can email me at dave@creatively-speaking.live. Yeah, I'm available on social media. My Instagram is @DaveZArt. And then, I think I might start a YouTube channel this summer on creatively speaking, like how do we turn our thoughts into things. So stay tuned for something like that. But I'm open and I run my own show. So if you email me, I will respond.
Dave, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, the pleasure's mine, Adam. Always.
Thanks for listening to Awaiting Approval. If you're a creative leader or stepping into a leadership position and want support that's honest, practical, and tailored to you. I'd love for you to come and join my Supercharged Creative Leaders program. It's a 4-week course built around 8 pre-recorded modules, 4 live sessions with me and the rest of your cohort, a private Slack space for you to ask questions and go deeper together, plus ongoing access to my alumni community once you complete the course. Each cohort is capped at just 6 people, so you'll always get personal attention, real feedback, and space to grow. And if you want to tailor the journey further, you can book extra one-to-one sessions with me, and we can dig deeper into the challenges you're facing right now. I built this program based on everything I wish I'd known when I started leading creative teams. No fluff, no jargon, just the tools, frameworks, conversation, and clarity that will actually move you forward. Spots go quickly, so if this sounds like the right fit for you, go to growwithadamjennings.com to book your place on the next cohort. Previous attendees have gone on to win major pitches, land new roles, get promoted, and step into leadership with more clarity, confidence, and purpose. You can find out more and book your place on the next cohort at growwithadamjennings.com. I can't wait to start working with you. Awaiting Approval is a Cordial Fox production, hosted by Adam Jennings, produced by Adam Jennings and Jasmine Egner.